Hey everybody, Greg here, and this is a short video to show you how to switch back and forth between the block editor and the classic editor when using WordPress.com. So I have a window open here, and I've titled this, it's a post that I just created. I've given it the title WordPress.com Classic and Block Editors. You can see there. And then what we're looking at now is the classic interface. So it's where you see these different styles for text, bold, italic, etc., centering text on the page. So that's the familiar classic editor, the visual tab, and then of course HTML. We can do that as well. So it's really been a very nice editor. But WordPress is sort of moving toward the block editor, or at least making that prominent as what they would like people to start using. And the only drawbacks I've seen to the new block editor are just that it's difficult to mix within the same block multiple content types. So the whole point of the block editor is that you're going down the page and you're selecting, okay, this is going to be a photo in this block, this next block is going to be a bullet list, the next block is going to be a paragraph. So the idea is that you're going to decide what's going to be in each block on the page. And hopefully it would help with viewing on a tablet or a phone. You know, it can resize these blocks more intelligently based on what the content is inside that block. My guess is that is the goal behind it. And maybe it makes it a little easier and simpler for beginning users. For those who are used to web design as it's developed over the past 20 years or so, it's not easy because it's like a totally new thing to learn, right? So anyway, when you're in the classic mode, you may see this enticing message over here that says, try the new block editor and level up your layout, etc. So you click on that and you say, oh, sure, I'll try the block editor. And suddenly you're thrown into this block editor mode. And there's a little introduction with some tips, so you'll click through those. And you're in the block editor, and there's not really any obvious way to switch back to the classic editor interface. But let me show you a few things here. So you'll notice where I had typed something in previously when I was not in the block editor, it had to convert that into something. So it converted it into a classic editor block. I'm going to remove that. And I'll paste that same text here into just blocks. So you notice each paragraph got its own block. But the reason I'm showing you this is that, if you were in the block editor and you wanted to have some mixed content in the same box, like a picture to the right of some text, which is kind of common. It doesn't always look great when it's thrown onto a tablet or a phone, but sometimes people want to put a picture next to some text. So if you're in this block editor, you can come down here and press return, and now you're into your next block. And you can go up to the plus sign up here. You'll see these are the most used blocks: paragraph, text, photos. And then you'll see there are different categories of blocks available. Well, hidden in here, I say hidden because it's just not obvious to somebody glancing at that list, is the classic editor as a block. So if you go to the plus sign, search for classic, click on that, there is that familiar classic WordPress interface that you may have seen in WordPress.org, self-hosted sites, or WordPress.com. Has all the tools across the top row there, and these other tools on the second row, depending on how wide the screen is. I think those will wrap around, I guess not. Okay, so this little thing, if you're not familiar with it, toggles the additional icons. But anyway, I wanted to point that out so that if you're in the block editor and you're liking the block editor, but occasionally you'd like the old interface, you can bring that in as a block. But yeah, so for beginning users and folks who aren't familiar with the block editor and people that just want to go back to the classic editor, I've had people ask me, how do I do that? I clicked on block editor and now I can't get back to it. So what you want to do is go up to the three dots, the show more options, and down at the bottom of this, below the options link, is switch to classic editor. So I'm going to click on that. And there we are. And it says this post uses blocks from the new editor. You can continue, but you may lose some information. So you're starting to see here that there can be some problems. You know, if you've been using the block editor for a couple of months and then you decide, wow, this isn't working, and you go to switch back to the classic editor, you could lose some content. And there's some really kind of unusual HTML code that goes into making that block editor work if you ever switch back to the classic editor. Well, anyway, I'm going to go ahead and say use the classic editor. Because I just had basic text and I wasn't using any of the advanced block features, the text is back here, and we're now looking at not just a block that is the classic editor, but the whole page is the classic editor. And on the right-hand side, you see the familiar like status and featured image and all that stuff that you would be used to. We can look at HTML. Here, I'm glad this is showing up because I want to show you, here's an example of that sort of unusual code that might be inserted if you've been using the block editor. And if you're on a WordPress self-hosted site, or even on this one, you know, you'll be creating all this content that's using these unusual special codes in there. Now, the actual special block codes, HTML code, has been stripped out, but the comments are still here. So if you're using the block editor on a website and you go to, you know, do the page inspector or look at the code on a certain page, you're going to see all this HTML code that doesn't look familiar if you've taken, you know, HTML classes or something, or if you've been in web design for many years. You'll see, oh, okay, this is something proprietary or unique to a WordPress site that uses the block editor. But that's basically it. You just, you know, you want to probably, I would say for most people, you would want to stay in the classic editor. And unless it's really kind of a simple site with a few pages and, you know, one post a month or something, then maybe you could use the block editor and play around with that. But if you have a high volume site with a lot of content, and particularly, you know, there's some plugins that really do not work well with the block editor. Plugins and some themes. So when you have a theme that has its own editing system, a lot of those, like Divi theme by the Elegant Themes group, when you have something like that, yeah, you have to have Classic Editor turned on. And I won't go into details now, but with a self-hosted WordPress site, I'll give you the quick 1, 2, 3, which is, you know, if you want to get the Classic Editor going and you've upgraded to the latest version of WordPress, what you're going to want to do is go download the Classic Editor, the one that's from the WordPress community, and then install that plugin. You just, you know, go to plugins, add a plugin, search for Classic Editor, install it, activate it, and that will return your site to the Classic Editor. And so this video tutorial was mainly on, you know, what to do if you are a WordPress.com hosted site manager. So anyway, I hope that's been helpful. Always appreciate the likes and the follows and the comments. So feel free to, you know, if you're on YouTube, you can comment down below. If you're finding this video on some other website, you can just reach out to me through resourcesforlife.com or whatever, you know, website you're on. So anyway, thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.